Trade unions in Haiti push for more protests against the Moise government's alleged corruption. Brazil's Supreme Court postpones a ruling that could have seen the former president Lula da Silva freed from prison. And it's official, FARC party member Jesus Santrich has finally been sworn in as a senator. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Stefania Bravo. This is from the South. The National Assembly in Haiti has suspended its sessions after days of protests left at least 2 people dead and several wounded. Meanwhile, trade unions and social organizations are pushing for the continuation of the national strike against corruption and the country's current economic situation. From Port-au-Prince, independent journalist Ken Isidore has the details.
The national strike continues in Haiti. Supermarkets, schools, and banks remain closed. Meanwhile, citizens in Port-au-Prince are incensed by the murder of journalist Rospide Petion. Petion was killed last night while he was returning home in a car owned by Radio Sans Fin. There was also an attack against media personnel on Monday, as 3 vehicles owned by Radio Tele Guinéen were burned by a group of people. That night, President Jovenel Moïse was expected to address members of the public live on social media. However, he canceled the speech. The opposition, as well as various groups, called for Moïse's resignation, as they blame him for the country's current issues. Protests against the president have increased, with an anti-corruption movement launched last year via social media.
And also in Haiti, internationally renowned aid organization Oxfam has come under fire for its mishandling of serious sexual misconduct claims against its staff. Following an 18-month-long investigation, a charity commission found there was a culture of poor behavior among Oxfam staff sent to help victims of the 2010 earthquake on the Caribbean islands. The report, published on Tuesday, claims that Oxfam failed to either properly investigate or fully disclose allegations that children as young as 12 were victims of sexual abuse at the hands of an Oxfam boss. The anti-poverty organization was also severely criticized back in February of 2018 after it emerged that some of its workers engaged in sex parties with prostitutes after the humanitarian disaster in Haiti. Brazil's Supreme Court has put off until a later session a decision on an habeas corpus petition that could have seen the former president Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva freed from prison. A group of Lula supporters demonstrated outside the court in Brasilia, as a majority of judges voted individually in favor of the habeas corpus petition. This was on behalf of all those who were automatically imprisoned after the rejection of their second appeal, and could apply to Lula and several thousand other prisoners. But the Supreme Court agreed to take a final decision at a plenary session yet to be arranged. The Supreme Court has also agreed to hear a separate habeas corpus petition dealing specifically with bias on the part of the judges in Lula's case on June 25th. This follows the revelations made on Monday of a conspiracy to block Lula from taking part in last year's elections by the Justice Minister and then Judge Sergio Moro.
The material just released fully supports what we have always said as the defense team. The new documents show again that Judge Sergio Moro was not an impartial actor. He actually coordinated the accusations against the former president and then passed judgment on the case that he himself had built.
The revelations of alleged collusion by Brazil's current Minister of Justice to imprison Lula da Silva continue to shake Brazil. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Meir, has more.
The leaked social media conversations that The Intercept released the day before yesterday, showing members of the Operation Car Wash Task Force, which arrested Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva last year, talking about things like they didn't have the evidence needed to arrest the former president, talking about how they were working secretly to damage the PT party's attempts at winning the presidential election last year, even though the PT was leading in all the polls beforehand, and how they worked to prevent Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva from speaking publicly before the elections, have generated massive shockwaves across Brazilian society. The powerful Brazilian Order of Lawyers, the OAB, which administers the qualification exam needed for anyone to legally practice law in Brazil, issued a statement calling for Sergio Moro to immediately be removed from his post as Justice Minister in far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's cabinet. The powerful right-wing newspaper Estado de São Paulo, which publicly supported Operation Car Wash all along, is now calling for Sergio Moro to resign from his post. And Lula's defense team filed a motion for habeas corpus to throw out all charges against him that were incurred through the Lava Jato investigation due to the fraudulent behavior of the investigators. Now today, Supreme Court Justice Gilmar Mauro ruled that the Supreme Court will be able to vote on this habeas corpus on June 25th, and it could result in the immediate freedom of the political prisoner Luis Inácio Lula da Silva.
Thank Brian for that report. The struggle for land rights is one of the main issues facing campesino communities in northern Brazil. In the MST community of Maria Aparecida, many are standing up for their rights against the interest of private companies.
Sebastian Miranda is 69 and has lived for almost a decade in the Maria Aparecida camp in the Brazilian state of Rio Grande. Along with 7 of his 11 children, he produces food such as beans, corn, yuca and potatoes on several hectares of land. However, his family and more than 30 others face the threat of eviction. That's in the interests of wind energy companies.
We
have a big disaster here. A tractor ran over the yucca plantation in the middle of the field, and we couldn't do anything. There I said to everyone, let's plant again. They replied, Sebastian, we're going to have twice the work. We've already lost the plantation. But I said, guys, it's much worse to lower your head and cross your arms.
In 2010, more than 100 families from the landless workers movement occupied around 400 hectares of unused land. For 9 years without access to water and electricity, they've gone through several attempts at evicting them and destroying their homes and plantations.
Our goal is to democratize the land here, as there's plenty of real estate speculation, of tourists, of international businessmen, and also an occupation that has directly conflict with wind energy companies. This occupation is also the experience of the MST, what we call our popular agrarian reform that has its objective, besides democratizing the land, producing healthy food and building new relationships.
Lawmakers from the Workers' Party advocate for a better distribution of land and support for the development of family-based agriculture that's responsible for 70% of production in Brazil.
Land has always been something very important for the left wing. The truth is that it's our patrimony. It's a common good that unites us. So the union of the left, of the parties, of the social movements around agrarian reform, around agroecological production is paramount if people want sovereignty, food sovereignty, if people want to think about the freedom of people.
On 4 occasions, Sebastian Miranda has seen his plantations destroyed, along with other residents of the MST camp. He slept for a month in the rain after the passage of tractors. However, they still tell the story and lead the resistance, defending their right to housing, work, education, and health.
Coming up after the break, Venezuelan Foreign Minister rejects statements by presidents of Colombia and Argentina, and teachers strike in Chile. More details after the break. Welcome back. Guatemala is preparing for elections this Sunday, 16th of June. The campaign has been marked by tension and smears between the candidates and a series of corruption scandals. Our correspondent in Guatemala City, Mario Rosales, reports.
Here in Guatemala, the final arrangements are being made for Election Day on Sunday, June 16th. The boxes of voting materials are already being distributed across the 23 departments to the country's more than 330 municipalities. Also, the first boxes have already been sent to the 3 cities in the United States where Guatemalan citizens are allowed to vote. This will be the first time Guatemalans abroad are able to vote for the president and vice president. These 3 cities of the U.S. were chosen because it is where most Guatemalans in the U.S. live. A total of 119 ballot boxes are to be used there on Sunday. Also, the Human Rights Office has requested that electricity be guaranteed on Sunday to avoid any electricity cuts that could harm the process. One of the candidates, Alejandro Giammattei, has presented a lawsuit against another candidate, Roberto Arzu. He is accusing him of defamation and slander in what has been a very dirty campaign. According to the polls, the two of them are battling for second and third place.
We thank Mario Rosales for that report. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has rejected recent statements made by the presidents of Colombia and Argentina regarding his country. Both presidents met on Monday and said they support increased pressure against the Bolivarian government. In a tweet, Arreaza said what South America needs is an end to drug production and trafficking, human rights violations, war, and paramilitarism. He also called for an end to false positives and narco-politics in Colombia. Meanwhile, Arreaza took a shot at Argentina's President Mauricio Macri, stating that Argentinians demand an end to his government's infamous and failed neoliberal policies. Thousands of Chilean teachers marched to Congress in Valparaiso on Tuesday as part of a national strike in defense of public education. According to leaders of the march, the protests are geared towards improving the quality of public education in Chile, since the current government is in favor of privatizing the sector. Various social movements have also joined the group.
This is a very unjust fight because the government has all the political and economic power. And we are the teachers. We are honest people. I think people understand the importance of our fight. We have had lots of support in the streets, and not only from teachers, but also from various social movements.
This is not a march for better pay, but for quality education. For example, in infrastructure. There are some schools where there are rats, where the students don't have books to study, where teachers have not been paid for over 4 years. And recently, they have made the study of history, physical education, and art optional.
The president of Bolivia's Chamber of Commerce, Rolando Kempf, has described the meetings between his country and Paraguay as historic. The meetings are set to take place on Tuesday and Wednesday in La Paz, where both countries seek to establish agreements on integration in areas such as energy, bilateral relations between the CAN and Mercosur, and also the economy. In April of 2018, representatives of both countries created the first Chamber of Commerce and Integration to strengthen commercial relations and promote the Paraguay-Paraná waterway. And Mexico has set up a special commission to analyze and address migration flow. The commission, led by Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard, seeks to create a system of regional immigration management. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says Mexico is prepared to work with other countries while identifying the underlying causes of recent migration flows.
The most effective and human way to deal with the migratory phenomenon in any part of the world is to address the actual causes of migration. This will not be solved by the use of force.
Over 100 U.S. citizens who are members of the Venceremos Brigade are pushing ahead with plans to travel to Cuba as part of a 50th anniversary contingent. The trip comes on the heels of Donald Trump's reinstatement of the ban on U.S. citizens traveling to Cuba.
They are U.S. citizens who comprise the Venceremos Brigade, a coalition of people showing solidarity with the Cuban Revolution while challenging U.S. policies against Cuba, including the blockade.
Because of the present administration, we've been thrown back another 20 years. And why? Because Cuba has been the lighthouse. Cuba has been the example. Cuba has participated in support of peoples who are struggling throughout the Caribbean, Central South America, in Africa.
This year marks the 50th anniversary of the brigade to Cuba. Over 100 U.S. citizens are making the trip.
We have people coming in from different regions across the country, maybe 20 states who form part of this group. They come from across several generations, from diverse racial backgrounds. And to us, it's very important that more people get to see the Cuban reality.
Many of the participants have defied recent travel bans imposed by Trump so they can see and experience Cuba firsthand.
Won't keep us from going to Cuba. We will be going. We will learn about Cuba for ourselves. We'll see it with our own eyes. We do not align. We do not agree with the decisions of our government, and we want to make sure that that is clear on an international level. Because the issues that we are fighting against U.S. imperialism in other countries of our government, we are also fighting here in the United States.
I will stay here in Cuba because I have the right to travel to this country and for the people to see how Cuba is, the good and the bad, the whole picture, even with their complications and all.
Despite this, they say when next they return, they would like to cross the borders with Canada and Mexico and to declare that they have come from Cuba and that they demand an end to the blockade and to major new restrictions on U.S. citizens traveling to the Caribbean island.
And after the break, Sudan protest leaders have reached an agreement with the ruling military council. Join us again after this. Welcome back. In Sudan, protest leaders have reached an agreement with the ruling military council to end their civil disobedience campaign, which began after a crackdown on demonstrations. Both parties concurred to restart negotiations on the formation of a transitional government. Meanwhile, the transitional military council has agreed to release political prisoners as a gesture of goodwill. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia is leading the mediations.
They agreed to uphold what they have agreed upon before the suspension of the negotiations regarding the structures, powers, responsibilities of the transitional government. Talks will resume soon in good faith to iron out outstanding points, including the Sovereign Council and other relevant matters.
One case of Ebola has been confirmed in Uganda outside the ongoing Democratic Republic of Congo outbreak. The World Health Organization announced on Monday one Ebola case of a 5-year-old boy in Uganda. This is the first cross-border case since an outbreak began in neighboring DRC of last year. The boy is said to have traveled with family from the Democratic Republic of Congo to Uganda this week. The Ministry of Health has dispatched a response team to the area.
Ministry of Health would like to inform the public of the confirmation of Ebola virus disease in Kasese district, Uganda. The confirmed case is a 5-year-old boy who traveled from the Democratic Republic of Congo with his mother yesterday, the 10th of June 2019.
And thousands of Algerian students protested in Algiers on Monday, calling for a democratic government. The students demanded the removal of the ruling elite as they push for electoral reforms. Protesters are also calling for the resignation of interim president Abdelkader Ben Salah, who had been initially elected to lead for 90 days until elections are held.
Our demands are that the remnants of the regime would leave, that would have honorable and transparent elections. Our demand is that the remnants of the regime would leave and live.
A civilian state and no a military state. We want a civilian state and no military rule. We demand that they leave and we refuse to have dialogues with them.
6 people died when fire swept through a psychiatric hospital in the Ukrainian city of Odessa. 4 others were hospitalized, while another 9 escaped unharmed. The fire erupted late Monday evening in the 1-story building. The cause of the blaze has not yet been established. The decriminalization of homosexuality in Botswana has paved the way for people to challenge laws in which LGBTQ have been excluded. This was expressed by Hape Pichane, an advocate for gender dynamics, working with countries in the region on LGBT and women's rights issues.
As for individuals, it means now there's more openness towards advocacy. There's more that can be challenged to say that if this is a privilege, it's not a privilege, if this is my right. At the end of the day, like each and every citizen, I have equal rights to access this. I have equal rights to access workspace without being discriminated. I have equal rights to access to choose who's my life partner. And when that is being violated, now even means individuals also have a stand of arguing and pursuing cases to say that I'm being violated here.
In France, medical staff have protested against proposed reforms to the country's healthcare system. This as the Senate prepared to vote on the amendments on Tuesday. Emergency workers and other staff from hospitals gathered outside the Ministry of Health in Paris. Among their concerns are issues over the lack of resources. And now from the sports, the desk, as we continue coverage of the Cricket World Cup. Bangladesh's match against Sri Lanka has been called off without a ball being bowled due to heavy rains in Bristol. With both sides taking a point from the washout, Sri Lanka moved up a 5th in the table and Bangladesh claimed 7th. This is the 3rd match of the World Cup to be abandoned. The previous highest number of abandoned games in a World Cup was 2 in 1992 and 2003. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.